outskirts, so I don't, I could have trash collection, but I just as soon go to the hills. That's right.
Hello and welcome. Come on in and sit down.
Yeehaw.
Hey, Paul. Welcome to Palmetto Woodturners. This is August 1st, 2015 for the video. How about that? I'm excited. How about y'all? This is going to be great today. Especially with all these bowls and all these sharpeners and everybody here. We're going to have a good time. Announcement. Who was here yesterday for the hands-on? We had about 15 people. Now, somebody went home and their wife looked at him and said, "Honey, where you been? You're not wearing your wedding band." And this was left over here on the table.
They're divorced now.
Yeah. So the only way I can remember to bring it this morning without messing up everything in my pockets is put it on, so I'm married twice. But anyway, that other woman was surprised. So please see me so I get this ring back to you.
Still locking it down tonight.
That's right. Black eyes. Thanks. What do you say?
He said he wanted me to call him back.
Okay. We're dealing with all kinds of stuff. Couple announcements, and then we're going to jump right in because I really want you to have time to see these sharpening systems and get your tools sharpened. And for Jack, well, I'll leave all that to Tom. Jim, I don't want to take away that thunder. David, you got any announcements about the library?
We have the actually Harwood, some of one DVD is here, and Glenn Lucas's DVD is here.
Great. All right, now I don't want to fail to welcome any guests. Do we have any guests?
Okay.
Well, introduce us.
All right, this is my son. Oh, my grandson. I'm out of kidding. He's from Michigan.
We won't hold it against you. We hold it against yours, part of your heritage. Yeah, I know.
We forgive you.
All right, our past president, Roger Wright, with his grandson. Thanks, Roger. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Any other guests? We had a great time last night. Don Beasley, did you make it this morning?
He's not here.
Don did a great job. I think we had right at 30 folks at dinner last night. That was a really fantastic showing. We had, I don't see Justin Rickey. Want to give him credit for our shop hop yesterday. He did a good job. We had 14, 15 people in here. Stayed booked all day. And I especially want to thank those folks that really had worked hard to clean up and stay. That was a lot of work. It was a good mess, and you guys did a great job in setting up that kind of thing. Fantastic. Two things that I need to cover. Michael Holster designated me. I've got 2 of his hook tools left. If anybody wants them, see me at the thing. And I've got 5 of his extra fine flat credit card style sharpeners. Although we got them out here in the store, I think they're one different grip. But you might look at the store first and then check with me if they don't have them. So got that out of the way. And let's see, is anything else? August 27th. August 27th is the night of the auction and the affair that we're going to have for empty bowls with Harvest Oak Food Bank. And you'll get an invitation. We'll try to start getting email out, and maybe we'll even publish the addresses. Or I'm not sure how we're going to get these tickets out yet, but Harvest Oak's working on most of that.
Are they selling tickets fast?
They will be. Yeah, they will be. You can probably get them at the door as well, but they probably want to know RSVP for food count, that kind of thing. Randy, is it you?
300 Senate Street.
Pardon?
300 Senate
I
Street.
think that's correct.
That was where she tentatively had. So let me just say one
Go ahead,
thing.
Randy.
All of you have networks. All of you are in other organizations and things. So when the email goes out, get that out to all you folks. You can see back here. This is a good sample. Most of what will be there. There'll probably be some more. But there'll be some grand opportunities for people to get some Christmas presents and stuff at bargain basement prices.
And you can buy
Yeah, and you can buy them too, but I've seen some of these turners that this is quality that would be in a studio at 3-4 times the price that they've got marked on it. Of course, it could go up to that and bidding, but there's some prime work back there. Let your friends know, come out and I think they're gonna charge $25 and that would just cover the food and all of that. They're gonna have first class probably food and stuff along with it. So it'd be a good night out for folks and an opportunity to help our soap.
Question?
No, I just wanted to tell you that I just counted about 68 bowls back here, so y'all did a great job. There's 68 bowls back here.
All right, how many?
68.
68, and we got another 20 in the back, or close, close to that, in the back, so. Yeah, we had some of them out last week. We want to thank the folks that worked, Steve Slater and David Null for DJJ. They worked with those young folks out there, and we have probably 12 to 15 bowls that they produced that's in with our mix. Thanks, guys. Good job. Yes, sir?
I talked with the lady, even though it's for Harvest Hope for food and stuff like that, she will take any other kind of turnings too.
Yeah, we didn't push that, but several people asked me. We know that those will sell. Some of you that wanted to make other than a bowl, that was fine, but the theme, the concept was empty bowls, which is an AAW type of project nationwide. So that's where it is, but hey, all is accepted. The whole thing is to feed the hungry and help the communities, the 20 counties across South Carolina that get support from Harvest Hope Food Bank. Okay, is there any, welcome Jay and Jerry back. Raise your hand. Daniels, we're glad to have you guys back with us. They took a little hiatus for a while, but they're back, right Jay? Where'd you go?
Right here.
All right, buddy. Good to have you back. Any other announcements that need to be made? If not, let's turn it over to our program chairman, Mr. Jim Waterbury, who does a fantastic job. Welcome again.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank everybody for being here. This looks like a pretty good turnout. And you'll be supporting a lot of your fellow members because they're going to be doing the demonstrations and helping hands-on parts of the class. But before we get started, I do want to mention next month's meeting, Jim Duxbury. It's the second weekend of September because the first weekend is Labor Day. So we're pushed it back to the second weekend. We will have a hands-on class, and he's well known for doing his kaleidoscopes, and we will be manufacturing kaleidoscopes. And we're going to do all the turning, the mirror cutting, glass cutting, everything that's involved in it. Nothing's going to be prefab. It's not a kit that you're going to put together. You're going to be doing all of that. So that would be a good class. On Saturday, we're talking about doing flatware. What he explained to me is taking some items, glue them together, making the turning, and be able to split them apart, manufacturing like furniture legs and other things that you may do with it. So it'll be a real good time with Jim Duxbury. He's been here in the past. Real good fellow, and he's got some products here for sale. He has a patent on a respirator system, and he'll even bring that and talk about that a little bit. But he and his wife will be here in September. Okay, but the meeting today, the way I have planned for it to go, we're going to start out the first part of the meeting with finishing, and in the finishing, fellow members Jack Gould and Richard Kale will be doing the finishing segment of the meeting. Then we'll end up breaking. When we come back, then we'll get into the turning, sharpening part. And in that part, I have David Petrus on the sorting machine, Terry Daw on the work sharp. We have a gentleman from out of town. Everybody's probably had a chance to meet him, Ken Rizza from
Woodturners Wonders.
Woodturners, somewhere in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia?
Yeah,
Atlanta?
near Atlanta, Lawrenceville.
Lawrenceville, Georgia. He'll do some turning with the Woodturning system, but he also has his new CVN wheels that he'd like to demonstrate and show. And then we also in the carving have Randy Grant. He's got a station set up. He's going to talk about carving, to add some carving to your work. So it should be a fun time, good time, a good learning time. Something I want to offer to everybody. I'll pass this around. This is a sign-up sheet for if you'd like a copy of the video for today's meeting. We'll get some copies made and have them distributed by next meeting to you. So that way you can refer back on any of the sharpening or any of the techniques Jack Richard will show you on the finishing. If your memory's like mine, I don't have one. Sorry, go over here. So,
I'm sorry, can I just jump here and say something? On your seat is a plastic bag. There's some free blue tip holders for you there. But more importantly, there's a raffle ticket in there. If you'll fill it out and drop it in the box sometime during the meeting, and whenever you guys want to run the raffle, we've got some stuff to give away along with your raffle. So, thank you.
And I will give each of them time to introduce themselves and talk about the machines, the sharpening system, stuff that they're going to be working on. So they will have that before we disperse and go through it. And hopefully you're all able to bring some tools to be sharpened. So take advantage of that, get some help on anything that you might need help with. So, okay, with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Jack. And welcome, Jack. Appreciate him stepping up and offering his expertise.
I'm gonna sit down. Oops. You wanna get the lights?
Go to it.
All right, well, Jim called me about 2-3 weeks ago, and he said we want suggestions for the August meeting. And he said, let us know what you think you'd like to have. So I suggested, well, maybe finishing would be good. And I said, if you need any help, let me know, and I might be able to volunteer. Well, unless you get anybody else. Well, Jim quit looking right then, so I think that's typical. But I said, what in the world have I got myself?
I got a mic.
Can you hear me?
You wanna wear a mic?
It doesn't. Well, I'm just talking a little louder. What in the world have I got myself into? I said, I've got all these pros out here, and most of them are great turners and they're great finishers, but every once in a while you've got a scattering of new folks, and I said if we can just get some tips into the brains of these new folks and show them a little bit about what's going on, it'd be well worthwhile. I figured that the best way to enter into this would be for me to see the types of finishes that I've tried. And how many have a shop that's full of catacombs and old boxes and things like that?
Yep.
I mean, that you don't remember what's behind that box and so forth. Well, I started looking, and I thought it would be interesting to you folks to see what climbed out of Gould's catacombs. And sometime earlier, I think I had done a real short thing on finishing, but I remembered that one of the things that was always in the back of my mind is, how do you handle a can of finish? Do not shake.
Right.
Shake or stir. How many people walk up out in Ronnie's finishing section and pick a can and they start shaking it, and all of a sudden, well, if it's polyurethane, you better just set it there for about 2 or 3 weeks. But I began to pick up stuff that was in my catacombs, and I thought it would be interesting. Here's even some urethane oil from Nick Cook that came back in '02. Liberon finishing oil. Funny story about this. I was finishing a piece one time, and I think one of the best finishers that I know of is Gerald Starnes. He does the beautiful platters, you know. And I called Gerald and I said, Gerald, I've got a can of Liberon, and I said, what do I do? How do you use it? And he says, well, just keep applying it. You know how things will dull out on you on certain grains? He says, if it dulls out, just keep applying it. Just keep applying it. Well, I don't think he knew how porous the wood was I was working with. And this stuff runs about 20 bucks a can. And I think I used a half a can on that one piece. So I've learned at that point that you have to taper your type of finish to the wood. Mineral oil, got some of that from Nick Cook. Now these are all things I just picked up out of my Deft. Tongue oil. Deft clearwood finish. Rye wax. Danish oil. Some of these things have had an inch of dust on them. If you use Mahoney's walnut oil, you add this to the finish after you're done. Well, I called Mike and asked him about the use of it, and he said, we don't use this stuff anymore. But he still sells it. So it's kind of interesting. Watco Danish oil. One thing I wanted to tell you, and this is really astounding, because after I got done looking at some of the things I wanted to point out, I went into my files. I've got a tendency to save all sorts of stuff, so I went into my wood turning file, and I went to sanding and finishing, and this is a 2006 little email that I sent out to Jim Bruton and John Harvin, Charles Watson, and Steve Harrell. And I had found this one particular item that really was astounding. It came in from a fella, and he said, how many of you use Watco?
I have. I've used it.
Okay. He said, what is a safe curing time for a Watco finished piece before setting on a wood end table? I completed a piece, finished with Watco, dried for 48 hours, set on a table, and it made a ring that seems to be permanent. The vase was totally dry to the touch, seems like it must have been a vapor from the curing process. He says, I tried cleaning it with Murphy's oil soap, furniture polish, to no avail. Well, one of the responses came from Russ Fairfield, who's really good with finishes. If you have a computer, go in and just bring up Russ Fairfield wood finishing, and you'll find a wealth of information. But Russ replied, he says, it will be safe when you can no longer smell the finish on the wood. Until that happens, there will be vapors present and the potential for damage to a tabletop that can take up to 2 months for Watco. He says, I may be paranoid, but I never put anything other than a coat of wax on the bottom of anything that will sit on a table for any length of time. Having to redo an antique shellac finish on a table that was damaged by a 3-week-old lacquer finish made a believer out of me. Be glad that it was your table and not someone else's. So I didn't ever know that. Have you all had anything like that come out? Apparently this other fellow really did. But that was rather astounding. How many use a lot of lacquer?
Yep.
Everybody? Bullseye shellac. Anybody use that? Got a couple people in there using that. One of my favorites I keep on hand is rye wax. It comes in dark brown, light brown, and in a regular clear. It'll shine anything. I watched the guy that represents the company go in, and he shined shovels, he shined axes, he shined everything with rye wax. He said it's just amazing. And he said just a little tablespoonful of it will polish the biggest dining room table that you have. So it's always. How many keep this on hand? Nobody?
Well, the only concern I have with it is it has a lot of odor to it, so you need to be in an open place.
Yeah,
without
it's.
have fans going.
That's
when you
right.
first put it on.
You need ventilation if you're using it. All right, then there's the old standby, this plain old Midwest paste finishing wax. Now, mind you, these are all things that came out of my corner of my shop. Here's some Liberon black patinating wax. You got something that's got a good grain like ash or walnut, some of the others, you can rub that on, rub it off, and it'll really go into your.
Jack, can I borrow your phone? They wanna mic you up, cause they can't hear.
No good preaching now.
Yeah. That's your job. Amen, brother, bring it on.
Give him a head massage while you're there too, he likes it.
All right?
Yep.
Good.
All right. Good. There you go. All right.
I've had that.
Wipe on poly. I like Midwest products. They're very good. The wipe on poly is extremely good if you want some durability to your finish. I use this on urns that I make, and we have a lot of handling, a lot of passing around, and it's very good. All right. Sanding sealers. Didn't know there were so many around, but you got to be careful depending on what you're going to apply for a final finish, and the type of wood that you have. And I'll read another thing from one of the on the earth emails that I sent out that has to do with the use of sanding sealer. You have lacquer sanding sealers, you have regular sanding sealers. Salad bowl finish, how many of you have used this? All right. You know, you fight the old
Medication time.
story about it's not safe, food safe, unless you use salad bowl finish. Well, you know, Nick Cook will tell you, as long as it's cured and dried, you're safe. Here's another can of Watco.
Right here, Jack.
But you notice that one's just about full. Most of these you got not too much out of them. Water locks. Jim Bruton, is he here? Jim he's a supporter of water locks. I think he uses that on all of his products. How many use water locks? Okay, it's supposed to be one of the most popular, but I don't see many hands coming up. How many have ever used Bloxygen?
No, oxygen, is that where you spray and take the oxygen out?
Yeah, they say it's good for about 75 quarts, I believe. And this one is empty, so I must have used it all up. But if you're using something up fairly rapidly, you know, you don't need it. There's all sorts of methods that you can use. You can put marbles in the can. Just occupy the space and have less oxygen above it. Here's another type of friction polish.
I don't know which one I prefer. I've used them both. How many use friction bottles?
Miles.
You like miles? Anybody use the Brywax too?
John over here. Now, Jack, I noticed that the Mylons had separated. Does the Brewax separate when it's sitting?
I don't know, that's why they put it in a
Oh,
duck.
okay.
They put it in a can that doesn't show it. But it's good stuff. You can use it on your wine stoppers and such. One thing I didn't put in here was a sample of your CA glue. And I finished some small things with CA glue, but then I made the mistake of trying to get too big an object, and I really made a mess of it. So I don't know how many of y'all use CA glue on you. Well, she's got some back there.
Yeah.
And it's good on small items if you can control it.
I don't see.
Use the Parsons that Mark Soleil uses. The Parsons, CA, the thin, Mark does the bigger pieces with it. Remember that demo?
Okay.
Matt, I've got a name and address for Parsons people, anybody who wants it. You can call this guy direct and order it right straight from him.
Okay. How many use Renaissance wax?
Yes.
Well, you get a big can of that. They have it out here.
He's got money.
Well, they do. No, this one,
Standard size, right?
this one I got on sale, but this one is the first one I bought.
Yep.
And I got a habit of marking the top with a date. I got this in October 2006, and I still have probably that much in it. So it lasts a long, long time. You won't have any trouble with running out,
Now,
even
Jack-
with a small one. And its cost of that is,
Small one's about $20.
let's see. It hadn't gone up too much in price.
First,
I just
first
looked at it
one
while
was
I go out here.
$18.
$16 and something.
Yeah, I think it's 16 and
small-
20
small
something.
can.
20 something. And if you keep tuned in to all of these promotional things, this one was very inexpensive. I think it was about the same as a small can.
Now, when you use that, do you use that alone, or do you use it with something else?
You use it alone. Now that I've got a friend that's up in Canada, and he does a lot of shows. Eugene Schlack is his name, and if you're on the World of Woodturners, he's a constant contributor. He does things. He'll turn out hundreds of things that would take us, maybe weeks to do what he does in just a couple of days. But he said because he takes a lot of stuff to shows, he will, the last thing he does with his pieces that are going to be handled is put a coat of Renaissance wax on it. It goes on very thin, you buff it out, and no fingerprints. It will not leave fingerprints. It's really good stuff.
The reason why I asked, because when I first started using that, I was putting the Mylons on there first, and then was putting that on there second. And then I learned, not to just to use that only.
Well, you could probably do it that same way. The Mylons with the friction polish, and then as a final thing, you could go ahead and put.
It's just a protective coating.
Yeah,
They
it's,
use it on paintings and other things, and like you said, it protects the fingerprint. Plus, when you do shows and you're outside and you get any kind of mist or rain on Mylons or something, that
Yeah.
is gonna mess up. So this really is a protective coating.
now, my favorites are, as you might suspect,
Mahoney's?
is Mahoney's walnut oil. And they used to sell it by the gallon, and if you sweet talk the lady that you talk with at Craft Supplies and tell her that, you'd love to buy a gallon, but the shipping on it was so high, shipping was as much as the cost of the gallon. And she'd say, well, we'll bypass that, so don't give up on the shipping, just, they'll be nice to you. But now, they don't put it out in gallons anymore, 16 ounces now. Unless you went to Mike, that's the only way you can get it, 16 ounce
They carry it here too, don't they?
Yes.
What?
They carry
Yes,
Mahomes
I've
here.
ordered it.
I think so. But my favorite is if I have a bowl that I want to use for utilitarian use, salad bowls, utensils, depending on the grain of the wood and so forth, I use Mahoney's walnut oil almost exclusively. And then when I give a bowl away, if you go to U.S. Plastics, now they don't come with the marking on it. I've got a little rig that marks this with this walnut oil. I'll give one of these with the bowl, and it has a little pop-up cap, and I'll put about 3/4 of this 3/4 full of Mahoney's walnut oil. And then when the bowl begins to dull out, like I've got one in here that's dulled out pretty bad. A few drops in that, and it'll bring it right back to life. Comment?
What's that?
I said, go ahead and demonstrate it.
Do what?
Go ahead and demonstrate it. Put a few drops in it.
Oh, I won't do that right now. Incidentally, all these bowls, when Jim told me I was going to be talking about finishes, I had a few bowls that I had of my own that were not given away yet. But most of these bowls are from neighbors and relatives that I had given bowls to. I said, well, I called them back in. So a lot of this belongs to my next door neighbor, and you got to treat them right because they bring you food and they're nice to you. But the favorite of mine is the walnut oil and the antique oil. And when Hardware House went out of business, I think I bought about 6 or 8 cans of this, all that they had left. And
We
I
have
thought,
that here too.
You what?
We have that here too.
Yeah. But now that I've gone back into my file and I've read all of these things about tongue oil, most of these, a good many of these things like Watco and several of the others, they have a tongue oil base. So and some people use pure tongue oil. The only one I don't have a sample of here is boiled linseed oil. And how many, Ben Pendarvis has not been to a meeting here in quite a while. But Ben exclusively uses, on a one-to-one basis, boiled linseed oil and mineral spirits. That's all he uses on all of his bowls. How do you all use your boiled?
I actually read on the internet that the boiled linseed oil is not a food safe finish.
It's not a food safe?
It's not food safe. Now, just the non-boiled linseed oil, just normal linseed oil is. But when they boil it, when they do the boil process, they put some dryers and things in it that makes it not food safe. And I'll use it under another finish. I'll put boiled linseed oil on a bowl, and then maybe let it sit for 3 or 4 days or a week, and then put black on poly on top of it, and that oil kind of darkens the dark places and just kind of makes it like you have a real grainy piece that you want to accent some stuff. It kind of, to me, it accents some of those.
It's very slow and dry. And, depending on how many, these products, all these products have 1 or 2 dryers in them. I called up the Minwax people, and he described the 2 dryers that he had that were in the product. He said, I can't tell you if it's a light oil or a heavy oil or what type, what the main body of it is, but he said we have a lot of dryers that we use. And it's in their, MSDS information, which incidentally, if you call in the fairly near future, instead of an MSDS review of the product, it'll now be called a SDS, a safety data sheet, and that's going to be international. You won't find this in MSDS. I want to deviate just 1 minute. Bill Lee's not here, is he? Bill's one of our professional turners. That's all he does. He and his wife demonstrate and have travel all over the country with their products. And Bill has about a $250, $300 moisture meter. And he happened to be in Harbor Freight. How many know Harbor Freight?
Yep.
Whereas my neighbor says that's Harbor Junk. But anyway, if it's good for most of us. And he saw a moisture meter for $15, and he began to check it against his other meter. It's right on the money. So if you need a moisture meter, instead of using the old system of touching it to your face and that, this thing works. The other deviation I want to make is, and I can't remember the name of this thing, but they came out with, is it the Elio?
Elio.
Elio.
Say it again?
It's Elio by
Elio.
One Good Turn.
Yeah, if they were selling the big one, and if you bought the big one, you got the little one free. And it's how many have had your spur in your bowl, and you're turning away, and all of a sudden that spur breaks free? How many have had that? And you have to take it off, get you some more space, get the center point in there, and go back. You won't ever have this happen. You have one?
No, I've seen it.
But it's a good investment. If you ever these fellows are in Canada, and they've got something on the internet most of the time.
Yeah.
But it's a great investment. It's got,
He has a newsletter that he sends out. That's how I saw it.
yeah.
About what kind of price you're looking at there?
I wish you had that.
Guesstimate.
Less than $50.
I don't know,
Not
maybe. I think for these right now, $40, $50, something
That's
like
not
that
bad at all.
for both of them. And it's a more.
Elio?
One Good Turn is the
It's the
internet,
website.
it's Canadian.
It's onegoodturn.ca instead of com.
He does a lot of biography and things. We have his DVD here in our library.
Well, they also make boring instruments, you know, and that they make on their own.
Yeah, he sold those to Carter though.
Jack, can I take you back to finishing on sanding sealer? I know a lot of turners, and I use sanding sealer fairly regularly for ingraining and pop-up. I wanted you to see if you could talk about how you use that and when you use it.
All right. Well, let me show you something that was really new to me as far as remembering it. And this again is something that I had in my wood finishing file. The differences, this is from Russ Fairfield again. And this is a procedure that I had never tried, but it makes sense. Particularly if you've had a piece that would all dull out on you real easily, and you just keep feeding it and feeding it and feeding it, just like I did with that Libron. He says the differences in the woods is why I always seal the grain with deft lacquer before going to the oil finish. Wet, sloppy coat of deft and immediately wipe it off. Then immediately buff with steel wool and start the oil finish before the deft has a chance to dry. Now I've never used that method, but I'm going to try it. And that goes right into your